in the current society, present society, not only in India, but all over the world, there is a sharp rise in polarization and there is a lack of dialogue as we all see today. So, what happens in a typical conversation? How does it happen? That you are not really being fair to everyone, you are not being symmetric to everyone, you have a bias towards some people and not so biased for other people. What I tried to do in my book, I tried to create a conversation, space of conversation for both of them, and that is why I address both the issues. First one is the idea of the framework. The right should also just not throw the data, they should also like to see, they should have the idea of the framework because framework gives a lot of clarity in many situations. And secondly, I looked into the existing framework and I have some critical observations on that with my own framework. I am not saying my framework is great, I am just one person, but it actually exposes the obvious problems in the framework. Now, what is the basis for judgment, whether a framework is right or wrong? My basis is science. Anything should be scientific, otherwise it is not good. And what is scientific? Is a framework only scientific? The answer is unfortunately no. A framework does not make anything scientific. The centerpiece of science is data, observation, right, the reality, how do you perceive the reality. Just because you have a framework does not make it scientific. If that is so, then religions would have been also called sciences, that is typically not done in the scientific tradition. So, I start my talk with an example, Italian, I would say this is the beginning of science in Europe. Europe was probably the darkest place on earth in the 15th century, and they rose to great heights because of the scientific revolution there. I think the pioneer of that revolution is Galileo Galilei. So, what did Galileo Galilei start with? So, there was an Aristotelian framework. If you drop a lighter thing and a heavier thing, Aristotle says if it is 10 times heavier, it will fall 10 times faster, right. And when I was a child, I said, wow, this must be the case, and I throw a paper and a stone, of course, the paper is falling very, very slowly, stone is going very, very fast, right. I was an ignorant child, but this was believed by people for more than 1 millennia. Aristotle was more than 1 millennia, maybe 1.5 millennia before Galileo. But Galileo understood that reality has to be tested with very many versions, and what he did, he went up in the Leaning Tower of Pisa and dropped 2 balls, one 1 pound, 100 pounds, and then he threw them, and both the balls almost simultaneously, a 100 pound ball hit it little faster, but not much, and the 1 pound fall little later just. Yeah. So, this shows Aristotle had a framework, but it was not scientific, the data is negating it, right. Just keep it in mind when I will talk about the framework of majoritarianism. Second piece of science is, just because you have a goodwill, that cannot be construed as scientific. Again I give an example. In the mid 19th century, a lot of women in the Europe used to die while giving birth to children in the hospitals. One of the prominent hospitals, I mean probably the best hospitals of the world that time was Vienna General Hospital, and even there 1 in 6 women used to die while giving a birth to child. The general goodwill thought we should not blame the doctors, right, that is a part of goodwill, that patients should not blame the doctor, because otherwise the trust will be gone and it will go to better, it will lead to greater misery, right. So, that thing persisted, everyone was looking for causes elsewhere, not to the doctors. And here came a Hungarian obstetrician, his name is Ignaz Semmelweis. So, what he did, Ignaz Semmelweis. So, what he did, he looked into collected the data meticulously, and he observed that when women are giving birth even in roadside, most unhygienic places, to the midwives, the mortality rate is way below. When the doctor is putting in the hand, the mortality rate goes up. And why is it that? So, basically he came to the conclusion that we need to follow the sterilization procedure, other is doctors are operating on some other patient and the germ miscarried, right, and then we got a batch. So, I am just trying to give the point again, it is again a very important scientific discovery. It happened because we let the goodwill go. We just wanted to just having a goodwill in my mind without any scientific foundation, that is again not a good one. Now, let us go to the theory of majoritarianism. What is the theory? So, the idea is in a society the majority always oppresses the minority. You may not see this always obviously, but it is going on. Because it is going on like that, for the sake of harmony, peace, tolerance, it is important to not talk about the atrocities minority commits on majorities and highlight the atrocities majority commits on the minorities. So, I took some data and I use a global news service database which actually computes all data from the globe. Now, there are two incidents of big intolerance in India 2015. In one incident, one Muslim gentleman 50 something from Dadri, Uttar Pradesh, he was killed because Ali's possession of beef, right, that is the. So, and I think Akhlaq, now I got the name, it is Akhlaq. And one Hindu youth, his name is Prashant Pujari, he was also hacked to death. Now, if you look at same year, almost 2-3 months later, if you look at the number of news articles, the Akhlaq's article attracted maybe 20 times more than Pujari's articles. And I am not saying those who have done it, they have done it out of any mischief or lack of bad faith. I am not saying that. As I am saying, I will hold that both left and right, they have goodwill, and that is the promise of the entire thing. I will not hold anyone having any bad will, right. So, I am just trying to demonstrate what is the idea of majoritarianism, how it manifests. And if you look at the headlines or concerning Akhlaq, it was more about Nazism coming to India and genocides are happening and all these sort of things. I am not exaggerating, these are the words there. And if you look at the articles concerning Pujari, it was more of a small law and order situation. Pujari himself has to blame to an extent and all these kind of things. Again, they are out doing it out of their goodwill because they believe in this theory of majoritarianism in the interest of tolerance. And this is a not individual examples. If you look at the genocides, Kashmiri Pandit genocides, right, biggest exodus of people within India post partition days. Official statistics wise 1,20,000 got displaced. It got much fewer attention compared to let us say Sikh genocide in 84 or Muslim genocide in Gujarat 2002, all these cases. Again the same reason, I have given the statistics. Then what I have done, I looked into all the news articles in global media for 3 years, 2020, 21, 22. I got nearly 9,000 articles, and in many of these cases, some cases are abstract ideas of majoritarianism. I can't do anything, who is the guilty party. But many cases I could identify, the article says that this is the guilty majority. 80% of that guilty majority are the Hindus of India, 80% of the case. Just imagine, this is a global media, not Indian media. So, Hindus are 15% of the world population maybe, but they are being blamed for the 80% or more cases of the world. So, it is really a big chunk of our social narratives. It is not just a term one or two person are uttering. This has a big impact in the global media. So, the first obvious thing is well, it is a Hindu majority country and we know maybe the constitution has more provisions for the Hindus. The answer is unfortunately no, and I will not go into too much detail, but more or less articles. I mean, there is a book by Anand Ranganathanji, he jotted it down what is commonly known, folkly known, known is folk, that article 25 to 30, it actually discriminates against the majority in a way. So, the Hindus may not have an obvious advantage by law and by other means, that is a kind of thing. So, this is my entire section 1. So, basically it is a term, it is used against the Hindus who may not have an obvious thing, but those who are doing it, they are not doing it to have a malice against the Hindus, they are doing it to have a peace and harmony and tolerance in society. This is a very important thing to keep in mind. Now, section 2, I looked into, there are 5 sections of my book, I will describe each section because it has a different dimension. Section 2 is how do we come up with the idea of the tyranny of the majority, as it is told by Alexis de Tocqueville, one French diplomat. So, the idea that majority could be wrong, it is very well known. So, the Plato he has a book, and so in that book he gave this example. So, he is saying suppose you are in a ship and the ship is in trouble, would you go to the plebeian majority what they are saying, or you go to the navigators who know how to navigate? The answer is of course, I mean just that time ship was the prime most technology. You can think about the aeroplane, right? Aeroplane is tumbling, who do you go? The pilot or the what people are saying, right? So, the answer is obvious, but here the majority is not an identity based majority. The point to note that majority is known by the domain knowledge. Those who knows the domain knowledge, however minority they are, they have the kind of the understanding. And it was so like that. Even Alexis de Tocqueville, when he went to America, he was a French diplomat, he wrote his book Democracy in America, I think in 1835. So, that book he actually has a chapter, Tyranny of the Majority, and he said that America everything is voted by the people. That time in Europe, the aristocrats who have the domain knowledge of administration, they used to get in the higher house of the parliament, right. So, he was saying this is a tyranny of the minority, but again tyranny of the majority, but again it is not about identity, it is about the domain expertise. And then identity question became more prominent in the John Stuart Mill, but Stuart Mill said, well, to protect these rights you have to look at the smallest minority. Who is the smallest minority? The individual. I do not have actually may not have any allegiance to any kind of identities. So, my rights has to be protected. So, he gave the idea of the freedom of speech has to be sacrosanct and all these kind of things. Now, things got very different after a very prominent intellectual appeared in the scene. His name is Antonio Gramsci, an Italian socialist leader. So, Gramsci was a socialist and he has his present notebooks that are very foundation of the new left that we see in the West today. Also simultaneously there is something called the Frankfurt School. Frankfurt School is a group of academicians who was applying the Marxian theory in a new way. I am just going to explain it to you. So, what is Gramsci and Frankfurt School's idea? So, if you know the Marxism, it is a class struggle. So, basically they see society as a conflict between two classes, class struggle they call it. Ordinarily society we can see both collaboration and conflict, but here they give prominence to the conflict part. So, Marxian theory, the classes are defined by money, right, wealth, income. Gramscian theory, they are defined by culture. Now, so he says there are cultural classes, the majority and the minority. In the Europe, the Christians are the majority, the Jews and other people who are the minorities, right, and the majority always oppresses the minority. And then eventually this Frankfurt School, when Hitler's rise happened, the Frankfurt School basically they got all these intellectuals, they are kicked out by Hitler of course, and then they came to America. One very prominent person was Herbert Marcuse, and all the liberal disciplines and their theories, this is very connected. So, there is a person who does a very good research on that, James Lindsay, I mean you can look it up. He has a website, New Discourses, encyclopedic website. Now, what happened? These theories what constitute what we call liberalism today, and in this liberal dogmas majority is the identity based majority and they oppress the minority, right. So, you see the foundation and all this kind of thing. Now, this is my section 2, all this history. Now, third section is this theory has an assumption. The assumption is all cultures are equal. If all cultures are equal, of course, the majority could only dominate the minority, right. Are really all cultures equal? So, when you think about the conflicts, so there is a histories, long histories, and there are action, reactions, very difficult to see who was the aggressor, right, who is the victim. But there are some cases there are prominent aggressors and prominent victims. I will give you an example. When the Europeans they landed in the what we now call the Southern America or Latin America. If you look at the history, those people they treated the Europeans very human like way, most human way possible, most non-violent way, most respectful way, and the Europeans did the exact opposite. They treated them most non-violent way, most disrespectful way, most inhuman way. So, there are definite asymmetries in the culture that we do not talk about. And if you give this idea, so I am going to propose something. And I am not saying that you do not accept me. I say let the data tell who is correct, who is wrong. I define something, this term is a sociological term, it is called linear theory of social evolution. I define it, it has two characteristics. So, a plan is laid before the society that this is the plan, no amount of data is going to change the plan, that is number one. And this is not my descriptions, I am quoting Yuval Noah Harari, what he wrote in Sapiens. He said this linear theory started with Christianity. Before Christianity there was no linear theory. If you go to the ancient Greek historians, Herodotus, Chinese historians, they have all of a cyclical theory, like we in India we are quite familiar with, like sometimes dharma wins, sometimes adharma wins, it is a cycle, right. Chakravat paridvartante, sukhanicha, dukhanicha. So, all these kind of ideas, right. Christianity came up with a linear idea, right. Jesus is the first Christian, then Christianity goes up like this is the idea. Now, what happens? So, if you look at this idea, this is not cannot be changed by data. I will give you an example. Why Christians say Christianity is required? Because they said it makes us a better person, it makes us having more peace, goodwill, love and all these virtues. Now, in the 20th century, the person who is most respected in the Christian countries for the Christian virtues was a non-Christian, he was Gandhiji. Gandhiji never said Christianity is important in India or even required in India. He said it is their tradition, they should keep their tradition and do justice to do it, and we should keep our tradition and good justice to our tradition. And he was respected. He went to Rome and people do not go to Pope to ask the forecast, futures and all these kind of things. They came to Gandhiji. They said, I have a lottery ticket, tell me which is the number that is going to come up. So, they are seeing you as a new manifestation of Christ, right. But then this is the biggest problem, right. If a non-Christian could become have the most amount of Christian virtues, then your theories are sort of inadequate, right. But you are still holding on the same theories. Even the Christians, they will say, well, even the Gandhians need to be, the evangelical Christians, they will say that I called it political Christianity. They will say even the Gandhians need to be Christians, right, to be perfect human beings. The second part of the theory is, it is not an intellectual theory. This theory wants to otherize people. Now, this otherization again is a sociological term, I am not going to explain too much, but the basic idea is the other people are sort of inferior. It may not be always violence by physically, but there will be definitely intellectual violence, cultural violence, these kind of things. Why do we think this linear theory matters? Because man, manus, we are made of man, the mind. Harari calls this imagined reality. Whatever we imagine, that actually makes a big bulk of our existence. One psychologist, Viktor Frankl, he has a book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he has given this wonderful example. So, there is this person in the concentration camp with Frankl, and this person used to believe that this rumors were going around in these camps, that is the only way they can survive, right, in some sense. This camp will be liberated by a particular chosen date. The date came, went, nothing happened. That man was one of the healthiest persons. He could not take this setback. He fell ill and suddenly died. So, whatever we believe, it is a part of existence. If it does not happen, then we become restless, and that is why it is a big part of our existence. Now, I am not saying everybody in a culture or bad or anything like that, but I am saying this linear theory, it has a big role in a particular society. Now, these theories, first it is the political Christianity, but there are other theories, and I have argued in my book, political Christianity is almost dying, probably dead in Europe and Western world. But there are other theories that are more powerful. Political Islam is there, communism is there, all they have linear theories, right. Communism also same thing, I grew up under its influence, so I know it very well. You have to be in the right side of the history. So, the history is not an objective thing, right, it has a side, you have to take the linear side, right, everybody will be communist over time, and if it does not happen, that has to be otherized. So, what used to happen, this is a little personal anecdotal, but I think many can understand that. My father was a lapsed communist, and whenever he used to go, he was a philosophical bent of mind, he used to say, well, these problems in your theory. Now, if you see academically, nobody will see any problem with him, because he was saying very academic way, philosophical way, and he was not even imposing his opinion. If you want to come to argue with him, he will just say it out. But because he was saying that, he used to be the most unpopular person, persona non grata in a locality, because they are seeing how they are seeing it. They are seeing this is a person who is knowledgeable and otherwise, then this person should be right side of history. How he is coming to the other side of history? There must be something wrong with this person, and then this is sort of the otherization that happens, right? And then I think I have argued in my book, although physical violence wise it is not there, but these LTSs are more prominent, this linear theories is more dominant in the liberalism. Again it has again a very much a linear theory, things will be exactly equal everywhere, and that has to be sort of implemented however, right, that is sort of the thing. Now I claim, so there are some conflicts that will happen anyway. Suppose you and I has a domain where we share, and of course our interests could come in conflict and we can have it, but there are many problems that happen not because of that, because you have a linear theory and it demands the other person has to be otherized and cornered, and I say this is the source of intolerance. Now you do not need to believe me, this is only my theory, just like majoritarianism is a theory, we will discuss why, so whether it is relevant or not. Usually there are many books on majoritarianism, and I have read almost all the books on India at least. One written by University of Hyderabad Professor Fazal Tanveer, one written by University of Brown Professor Asutosh Barsne. There are other books, A.P. Chatterjee and others. So these books stop in this section 3. They say this is the theory and this society can be explained in these terms. I am not stopping here. I think that is not scientific. You need to test the theory against another theory alternative and see which comes out better in the data, just like Galileo did. Every theory has a grain of truth, 5%, 10%, but you should not universalize it to 100%. Then we are creating a lot of other problems for people. So just this is I am saying because my book, or if I written the books in the other dominant social science tradition, I need not write the next 2 chapters. I could have stopped only at section 3. Now you would say, what about Hinduism? Does it not a linear theory? So actually Hinduism is not a religion, if you take Christianity as a religion. So one of the I think most prominent worldwide celebrated Kannada intellectual, Sri S.N. Bal Gangadhar, he has a book Hidden in the Blindness. I have written a synopsis of his book in one of my annexures of his book, just for people's common understanding. He has argued very meticulously, efficiently that Hinduism is not a religion, it is a tradition, it is a different thing. Okay, maybe he is not the person to be believed. Let us take the other side, let us go to a Christian intellectual. So I went to one very celebrated Christian intellectual, Tom Holland. He is also saying the same thing, religion starts with Christianity, there was no religion before. If you go to a liberal person, Sheldon Pollock, he is also, they have also thesis, Neo Hinduism. They are saying there was no Hinduism before Swami Vivekananda. So essentially Hinduism is not a religion, right. So I am not saying anything very great. So no linear theory, anything like that, it is a tradition, people follow it because our forefathers did, it is a continuity, that sense of thing. What about Hindutva? Very loaded term, hot button, but I have to address it, otherwise the book cannot be written. So I have taken 3 strands of Hindutva, because it is not there is no general theory of Hindutva like there is a general theory of communism, it is not there. So I have taken 3 strands, I hope these 3 will be sufficient. First one is by Chandranath Bose, a 19th century Bengali intellectual, and Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore has a essay, it is called Hindutva, and they have told that Hindutva is basically different in the sense all the other dogmas they are anthropocentric, human beings are at the center of the existence. Now second strand, Vinayak Damodar Savarkar's, the book is called Hindutva, right, I think Essentials of Hindutva, and again there he talked about many things, and I have quoted exactly from the book passages, and he is saying there is no difference between the Muslims or Mohammedans, the language is used, and Hindus in terms of human qualities. Some of them has lesser education, that is pretty much it. Again this is not a denominative of linear theories, right. If you go to Nazism, it is a linear theory, the Germans, Aryans will take over, and in that kind of a theory the Jews, they are fundamentally bad, they cannot be equal to us, but that is not what Savarkarji is saying. And his party Hindu Mahasabha, this manifesto, it says we demand equal treatment, I emphasize, for all. Last strand, BJP RSS strand, I am not a part of this organization, just to make a clarification, but I am just doing an academic analysis. Now there are many people they have criticized it, and I have also showed their things, Asutosh Barsne for example. So these people said, I mean I am hearing this, listening to this from 1996, that there will be great pogrom, genocide, Holocaust going to come to India. the moment BJP comes to power. So, 28 years and counting, no such thing has happened. I look at the number of riots, they have actually come down. So, I took the 6 years prior to Narendra Modi as per the availability of data, 6 years after Narendra Modi, riots have actually come down. Number of scholarships given to minorities has actually increased in terms of number and amount. If you actually look at the Nazi Germany, Hitler came to power in 1933, prominent Hebrew scientists, they were like leaving the place en masse, right, everywhere. Einstein left, and then the other person, forgot the name, he discovered ammonia, how to synthesize ammonia, he also left. Haber, he also left, all these people. Nothing sort of that, I mean many people said that we leave India, but nobody actually I know that have left India. Now, you look at the last statistics, what about prominent positions, IS officers and other things. Actually after BJP came to power, number of Muslim IS officers have increased, not decreased. And of course, we know the Viva plays a big role in IS selection. You can put your own people in the selection panel, and of course, you can do all these things, right. But nothing has sort we have observed. So, I say observationally I see no trace of any linear theory. So, I am not saying RSS BJP are all correct, all good, all any such thing. I am saying is there a linear theory, is there a way to otherize other people, and this book was written, manuscript was written 1 year before today. I submitted the manuscript to the publisher, I mean not exactly today, but around this time. I could not predict the Ram temple. Had it been a Nazi occasion, on the most sacred Nazi occasion, you can't imagine a Jew being there. But when the Ram Mandir opened, one of the most sacrosanct Hindu occasion, Hindutva occasion, whatever you call it, but you see the person who actually contested Ram temple, right, Iqbal Ansari, he was there. Definitely it is not a sign of otherizing other people. So, but all this is my theory, the LTSC and everything. We need to have a test, and that is where the section 4 comes. Section 4 is about having a test between the majoritarian theory and my theory. Now, how would you know who is persecuting whom? The majoritarian theory says majority is persecuting, irrespective whether they have linear theory or not, does not matter. Whenever it is a majority, they will persecute. My theory says men are fundamentally good, they will not persecute other people. Only when there is a linear theory, they will persecute others. So, how would you know who is persecuting, who is not persecuting? Should you look at the media reports? That will be problematic, because there is a victimhood narrative, microaggression, there are many psychological things that says actually aggressors like to pretend to be victims. It is actually a good way to sell their thing. Its victimhood peddling is a very good agenda. The only way you will know, and this is where I use many economic framework, Ronald Coase and Friedrich Hayek tacit knowledge framework. I am not going to too much details for general audience, you can look up the board and can come back in the question and answer. So, idea is basically look at who is migrating out, that has to be the victim. If you look at this Nazi propaganda, it will look like the Jews, they are controlling Europe, they are persecuting everyone including the Nazis. If you look at the Jews account, it will be clear that Nazis are persecuting. Who is correct? Of course, Jews have to get out of Germany, of course, Jews have to get out of Europe, right, same framework. And then I went to something called Karl Popper's falsifiability, it is now called reducibility. So, this principle wise, so I tested different countries, some cases majority minority both having linear theory LTSC, some cases one having LTSC, one not. So, in the other different cases, I mean both could be correct, their majoritarian could be correct, my theory could be correct. But in one case, they cannot have the same prediction. That case is, so if you look at Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, these are Muslim majority countries and political Islam is very dominant there. So, it is possible that because of being majority they are persecuting, it is also possible because of linear theory they are persecuting, who knows what is the reason. Now, let us come to the case like India. Here the minority is having LTSC, maybe having LTSC, that is how I claim, and the majority are not having LTSC. So, my theory says Hindu population should go down and the majoritarian theory says minority population should go down. So, I looked at the census data, of course, you know the answer. I think now there is so much hue and cry over this paper by Shamika Chanu. So, we know all the answer, of course, the Hindu population is going down. And then I have given other examples, like for example, if you look at the PFI, the band organization, their pamphlets, they are actually saying it does not matter whether we are minority or not, we need to be more intolerant, and that is how we are going to win. So, they also know that being majority is not important, being more intolerant, more linear theory is important. So, that is what is called tacit knowledge, right? They know that knowledge. And is India the only exception? Well, arguably no, there are other places. Tibet, Tibetans actually going down, Communist Party, they are Han Chinese socialism or whatever LTC they have, they are actually making Tibetans going down. Go to Lebanon. Lebanon, the Christians were like very classical Christians, orthodox Christians without any linear theory. And if you look at, they are not Protestants, right? Generally Protestants, they have a more linear theory, and Orthodox Christians, they are just keeping their tradition. If you look at the other side, they have a Arab nationalism, socialism, linear theories. And if you see actually Lebanon, what is the case, that actually Christians from being majority reduced so much to become a minority now. So, there are many other examples I have given in the same context. And again liberalism, it is also making academia and all the prominent places devoid of non-liberals. In America 92% in academicians, they are liberals. It is a really big number, really big number. When population, popular vote wise is half and half, in one occupation 92%. And what if my theories are all wrong? So, there is something called the idea of confirmatory test. So, I used to do in laboratory, there is a nitrate salt, you have to do a ring test, all these kind of issues are there. So, I did a, suppose I am all wrong, then with the advent of liberalism, more harmony should be there in a society, more tolerance. Is that what the data say? Now, if you look at America, liberal theories are pitched in the universities 1970s onwards. A very prominent intellectual is 94 now, Thomas Sowell, he has written extensively on it. And there is a, I have given references to paper written by Ivy League professors. They have shown actually social intolerance has risen highly from 1970s to till today, I mean 2018 onwards. Now, the high priest of liberalism in power in America last 4 years, there is a massive rise in polarization. 4 years ago, people say 80% people said it is important to respect other opinion. Now, that number is 55%, from 80 to 55 in just 4 years. It is a very big number. So, confirmatory test suggests that I am not that wrong. Now, I am not saying that my theory is so great, after all it is one person, I am fallible, but it shows that it is vastly superior to the majoritarian theory, which is there all over the news media, all over the academia, everywhere, because they do not do this testing, they just leave at their thing at section 3. Yeah. So, then I know more research is required, but what I know for sure, that theory has to be discarded for having a sane conversation of the reality. Now, I go to the last part, if you believe me, what makes a society tolerant, harmonious? Can a theory make people harmonious? We all have, I mean almost all of us I assume, there are prominent very noble exceptions like Swami Vivekananda, Arakali Venkatesji, who have not married and they do not know husband wife. Can you really give a code of law to husband and wife and say these are the rules you follow in have a harmonious family? We all know that is not how it works. You need to understand each other, right? We need to understand people and sort of have a grow. So, this is called the empirical way of solving difficulties. There is a theoretical way which is given by these linear theories. So, in India we had a society called empirics driven society. It is coming from Bal Gangadhar, but it is coming by many others. One of the person is Tom Sowell, another person is American left economist, his name is the name will come to my mind, he is in Harvard. He has a book called Dismal Science. So, Stephen Marklin. So, all three people are saying this and I have quoted it in my book, I reference extensively. So, in the empirical way you do not posit any theory, you just like to go for a working with together, that is the Indian way of assorting difficulties. In the theory way difficulties are resolved very easily, because all are believing in a linear theory common cause. That what happens? When the linear theory wins, everybody in the linear theory, like Christianity, everybody became in Europe became Christian, no Roman pagans, no anyone else. What happened? There is a big war came up in the 16th, 17th century, and 8 million people died, right. I think it is more than, if you normalize for population of those times, it is more than World War II. And then basically people say, well, we do not need Christendom, that theory is not working, we need new theory, let us call it nations, and they carved out nations, and that is called the Peace Treaties of Westphalia, right. There are many, a few peace treaties in Westphalian region, I think 1648 or something, if I am not wrong. So then basically this was, so these new theories come up, again new theories start again adventures, like the nations, a few while they are quiet, but then again they became very hot, First World War, Second World War, again they said, well, linear theory is all wrong, now let us go to a new theory, liberalism. We have to wait to see liberalism, but I am predicting it will not work well either, the way it is going. Already we have seen, right, the way one president was convicted based on, presidents, any political leaders could be convicted, but not based on judicial theories that have not been applied to anyone else. So, this is what is basically the prediction, and now what is the path to tolerance. So, basically any sustainable social system could show us. Now, I am an Indian, but I am, trust me, I am not too nationalist, and not, trust me, I am not too patriotic. What I am seeing, it is the sustainable system that survived the test of time. There were great civilizations before us, Sumer for example, Egyptian civilization, maybe at least as old as us, maybe, I do not know, but Egyptian civilization is no more, Sumer is no more, but we are still there. So, maybe there is something we are carrying that shows how to have tolerance and peace, and it is written in our books. If you read Mahabharata, it is written, it is called Satya and Ahimsa. So, these are the two values. Now, when I say Ahimsa, many people translate it as non-violence, which is a Christian idea. The Indian idea of Ahimsa is little different, it is negating the source of Ahimsa, and it is different for different varnas. I will not go into detail, but it is a nuanced kind of thing, but it is more or less to promote less violence in the world, to remove violence from the world. Now, this is values were there in the Mahabharata even before that, and then when Buddhadev came, he said in a different tongue, he said pragya and karuna, but same thing essentially. Now, this idea of diversity, equity and inclusivity, this is everywhere. So, I have devoted considerable pages in my book to show that a lot of them comes in contradiction with Satya and Ahimsa. So, this is all about my book. I thank you very much for listening to me so attentively, and I invite questions, any criticisms is fine. Thank you.